She floated over the turbulent 30s like a man-made cloud.
You couldn't watch it without opening your mouth in awe to see this huge thing coming by.
She represented both the nation's dreams and her worst nightmares.
Every time this great big dirigible flew over events, it was just infuriating to those that hated Nazism.
She symbolized what man could achieve and what man could destroy. She was the Hindenburg.
Beyond what is known lies an unexplored world of shadows and phantoms. A land that knows no limits of time or space. From the dawn of discovery to the nightfall of catastrophe, journey to a universe of the unexplained, the unforeseen, the unbelievable. A place beyond reality where no question will go unanswered. A place where myth and legend are law, superstition a science.
It's time for our journey to begin. The Hindenburg. How beautiful you were. How tragic your fate. Knowledge surrounds these library walls, and with these instruments, that knowledge can be ours. The Hindenburg exploded into the world's history books on a rainy evening in 1937 at an isolated United States Naval Air Station in New Jersey. That terrible scene was far more than an accident. It was an inevitability, the collision of two worlds, the technical and the political. And this is what the world saw. At first, everything went smoothly. The great airship nestled to Earth as hundreds from the nearby town of Lakehurst watched. The rest of the country listened in on the radio.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It burst into flames. Get it started, get it started. It's fighting, and it's fighting. It's fighting terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring fast, and all the folks between us. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 20, 400 or 500 feet into the sky.
It's the most horrible thing that ever happened, to see the ship go up. We heard it over the radio, and it was just something terrible.
All the humanity and all the tragedy.
It was just a horrible mess on the ground, the black billowing smoke coming out of it. And the smell was so awful. It was from burning skin and burning hair. It almost made you sick.
And everybody
as we got towards the nose, I saw this one crew member come out of the ship. He didn't have a stitch of clothes on him. He was burnt from his head to his feet.
That night in Lakehurst was a fiery exclamation point, putting an end to the Zeppelin story. A saga of lighter-than-air craft that had been floating over the world's skies for 30 years. They began with one man, Count von Zeppelin. His innovative designs, perfected over the course of the First World War, reached their ultimate expression in the Hindenburg, a huge craft designed to be a virtual airborne ocean liner, capable of carrying passengers and cargo across the great oceans. She was a stunning technical achievement for her German creators, a fact that was not lost on the propaganda ministry of Hitler's newly elected Nazi government.
Well, that was one of their great accomplishments. This was the greatest airship that had ever been created. No other country could build a decent airship.
Well, it was a symbol. It's huge in the first place. When it comes over a town, everybody would come out to see it. It was a great public relations bit. Also, it was German. You know, it was big.
Only the Germans, the Third Reich, seemed to be able to get an airship that really worked. And the Hindenburg was it. It always flew low, and it was a tremendous thing when it went in over a party rally.
It's symbolic of German superiority. It's a huge monster that, I tell you couldn't watch it without opening your mouth in awe to see this huge thing coming by. And remember, this flew across the Atlantic, back and forth. It went down south. It had done everything. No accidents at all. The Hindenburg was the epitome of excellence in lighter-than aircraft.
The Hindenburg was awesome in its dimension. 1/6 of a mile in length, her 4 huge 1,200 horsepower engines pushed its massive bulk through the skies at a cruising speed of 77 knots. When you place the Hindenburg next to a modern jet airliner, its size is apparent. Even compared to a luxury liner like the ill-fated Titanic, it was huge, and it had more in common with that great ship than mere length. Neither of these transatlantic voyagers was ceremonially launched or blessed, and perhaps as a result, they shared similar fates. The Hindenburg left Frankfurt at 8:15 on Monday evening, May 3rd, 1937. The 36 passengers who paid up to $400 for a one-way ticket were quietly amazed at their luxurious accommodations. They could relax in the spacious dining room and enjoy meals prepared in the all-electric kitchen. Due to the ever-present risk of fire, all matches and lighters had been confiscated before departure, and smoking was confined to one lounge. Crew members even had the metal tips of their shoelaces removed, lest they catch a spark. The journey to Lakehurst went smoothly, and on Thursday morning, the Hindenburg appeared over the skies of New York. She was magnificent. There was a storm over Lakehurst, and the Hindenburg delayed her final approach until the rain had ceased. Down below, a ground crew waited to tether her to the earth, and on board, the passengers celebrated the end of this flawless voyage. The time was 7:25 p.m. What happened next is still a mystery. Despite every safety precaution, the great airship was doomed. Was this impending catastrophe an act of God or an act of man?
The explosion at Lakehurst could have come through a number of things, through an accident, through many things which I mentioned in my book. There was also the possibility that it was sabotage. I did not give it complete credence, but I thought it might be. And then a friend of mine, Dow Poling, wrote a book later in which he took this thesis of sabotage, and I believe he proved it in his book.
My personal belief is that it was not static electricity, that something went off in that cell. I think some sort of incendiary device or a short circuit. I do not think it was natural causes.
Was this tragedy deliberately engineered? Was the Hindenburg sabotaged? If so, by whom? Let's examine the evidence. We must meet the men who may have ignited that fatal spark. If the Hindenburg was sabotaged, it ranks as one of history's most dastardly acts. To understand this alleged crime, we must first examine a man, his motives, and the nightmare he created. Adolf Hitler was no stranger to public spectacle. He and his Nazi propagandists were swift to seize upon the Zeppelin and the awe these huge ships could inspire. And they soon became a target for the growing anti-Nazi movement.
There were plenty of people that wanted to do away with Hitler and Hitlerism, and every time this great big dirigible flew over events at Nuremberg or elsewhere, it was just infuriating to those that hated Nazism.
Author A.A. Holing believes that as a result, the Hindenburg was deliberately sabotaged, destroyed by a time bomb hidden on board. But who would and could do such a thing?
The theory that I put in my book was a time bomb put there by a crew member who I believe was at least sympathetic with the anti-Nazi resistance. We're talking about a crew member named Erich Spale. He was killed in the crash. He had been involved with a woman who was believed to be part of the resistance in Germany. If he did it, it is only my theory, I believe he would have timed it to go off after the landing, that he did not necessarily want to hurt anybody, but he wanted to destroy the symbol of Nazism with the big swastika on the tail.
According to this theory, the bomb was hidden here in cell number 4. It would have been easy for a crew member to sneak there undisturbed. Detonation of such a device would have been catastrophic. The Hindenburg was mourned the world over. The Nazi government publicly believed the cause to be natural, but privately they conducted a ruthless investigation of any and all links to sabotage. In New York, thousands attended a public funeral for the victims, and as the swastika-draped coffins were returned to Germany for burial, an inquiry hearing was convened.
There were 2 investigations. The American Commission just concluded that there was a leakage of hydrogen. It was set on fire by the St. Elmo's fire, the static discharge. The Germans, for political reasons, are very determined to have an accident explanation, because it would have given them a black eye in the Nazi period to have to admit that somebody had destroyed this thing without their being able to prevent it. So I think substantially that they had the right angle, and I do not believe in sabotage, and I knew a great many prominent airship figures at that time. They did not believe it was sabotage either.
The rumor about sabotage was a lot of baloney. It never happened, and I can't figure out how anybody can say it was sabotage, because if somebody was going to sabotage that ship or had to put a bomb on it in Germany, it would have blown up at least 10, 12 hours before it got here. The whole thing is just plain old static electricity.
Sabotage or not, the Hindenburg tragedy could have been prevented. And surprisingly, the men who could have intervened were not at the airship's controls. They were in Washington, D.C. They were members of the United States government. The Hindenburg was filled with highly flammable hydrogen. Its builders knew it was unsafe. But only one nation had enough of the safe gas, helium, to sell: the United States. This single piece of paper may have indirectly caused the deaths of the 32 people on board the Hindenburg. It documents a 1927 American law preventing the export of this non-flammable gas. And though the Germans begged for helium, they were denied. Hindenburg's final resting place in Lakehurst, New Jersey, has survived virtually unchanged since that May evening. On that night, there were hundreds of people on the ground. Only one was killed when the glowing rubble fell, but every survivor can remember what it was like when the very sky exploded.
I was a member of the civilian ground crew that brought in the Hindenburg each time it came in.
The ground crew was divided up between military and civilians. We didn't have enough military here, and so they hired a bunch of civilians to help the sailors to land the airship. I was part of the military crew.
Mostly it was just our weight that to hold it down as they fastened it to the mooring mast.
The Hindenburg was supposed to land at 6 o'clock that morning, and it was about 12 hours late.
That night, it came in, the beautiful sight, same as usual, but as it neared the mooring mast, they were having trouble connecting the nose of the ship right to the point of the mast.
Just about 300 yards away from the nose there, I saw this big orange glow in the inside the airship. It was like a big fireball inside before it broke through.
And just when they seemed to reverse the motors to assist them in bringing the ship back to the mooring mast, the terrible explosion took place. And I just dropped the line that I had to hold of to bring the ship in and ran for my life.
The fire didn't take long. I mean, it only took about 34 seconds to finish, and the fire came out of the nose like a blowtorch.
So I kept running, kind of the intense heat. If you didn't run for your life, it would have settled on you and you'd have been burnt to death.
We helped this old couple get out of the passenger compartment, and while we were there, somebody had taken a young girl out of there, and she was burnt from the top of her head to the back of her heels. The whole back was burnt, and she was laying on her stomach. And finally somebody brought her to the hospital, and I think she was one of the girls that, one of the people that died.
I was called on duty to come on the case of the Durners. That was the mother and the 2 children. And the mother said that they were standing in the observation side, and all of a sudden the air around them burst into flames. She picked up the boys, Walter first, he was the 10-year-old, and threw him out the window, and threw her second son, Werner, out the window. He was 8, told her 14-year-old daughter, Irene, to jump, and her husband to jump, and she jumped. The daughter did not survive, and neither did the husband.
The Hindenburg catastrophe doomed an entire industry. Never again would airships rival airplanes as a form of transportation. But the potential still exists for these ships of the sky to have a place in our modern world. Today we have the technology to create safe, economical and sophisticated lighter-than-air craft. The age of the Zeppelin may only have been interrupted, not concluded. It's unfortunate that the Hindenburg became entangled in the crooked cross of the Nazi Party, but her rise and fiery fall has eerie parallels with that of the Third Reich, the savage regime that created her. Though never officially christened, the newly constructed LZ-129 was originally given an ominous name, the Adolf Hitler. But the superstitious Führer reconsidered and ordered the name changed to the Hindenburg. He didn't want his name associated with something that had the potential for fiery destruction. Adolf Hitler's worst fears became reality almost 8 years to the day after the Hindenburg catastrophe. For in May of 1945, his hellish Third Reich crumbled, and Hitler was destroyed with it, his body feeding the same flames that had consumed his great airship. The arrogance and barbarism of the Nazi era was over. The swastika would never fly again. The Hindenburg has had become a symbol of the years just prior to World War II. Years of turmoil, depression, and ultimately violence. Her blazing demise was but one catastrophe of those years. There would be far worse to come. Somehow, the shocking suddenness of her end will always be remembered. A time when man's dreams came crashing to earth. The Hindenburg. A tragic legend.
Secrets and Mysteries presents information based in part on theories and opinions, some of which are controversial. The producer's purpose is not to validate any side of an issue, but through the use of actualities and dramatic recreation, relate a possible answer, but not the only answer, to this material.
According to a recent poll taken in the United States, half of its population believe that the universe is inhabited by other intelligent life. The rest of the world cannot be far behind. The 1950s witnessed a sharp increase in the number of sightings all around the world, and with it, more and more evidence that something unusual was happening in our skies. Even the United States government took notice, beginning an official Air Force investigation called Project Blue Book. Their files soon overflowed with more than 12,000 sightings. These water beasts may well be the most ancient surviving inhabitants of our planet.
Did I see the monster? I don't know, but I do believe that, I obviously saw some things, and nobody's been able to tell me what I saw. So I think I must have seen the monster.
Stonehenge. That place has become a metaphor for the magnificent, the unfathomable, and the mysterious.
I have the feeling that the people who built it had something very strongly in mind, maybe more than the astronomy and the worship. And I wish to goodness I knew what it was, and maybe I never will.
German scientist Werner von Braun is considered to be the architect of America's space program. Von Braun and his team took the technology from the German V-2 rocket, which had been created for destruction, and applied it to the development of the chariots that would take man to new worlds.
There's never been an astronaut who got on a spacecraft, whether it was Mercury, Apollo, or even Shuttle, who didn't fully understand the risk involved and who wasn't willing to take them.
The only voyage of the Titanic was surrounded by bad luck that defies belief. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It was as if she was cursed. A curse, some say, began when she was launched.
He went up and he came back. He said, "It's nothing much. They only struck an iceberg."
This magnificent object is a symbol of genius, of ambition, and of dedication, for it is believed to have taken 30 years to construct. And that construction is not the least of its miracles.
It stands as one of the most prominent monuments for its size and complexity, and also its lack of information about it. To be able to plan and economically accomplish such a large feat for the pharaoh is extraordinary.
This is the mark of Sasquatch, taken from a set of tracks that covered a 5-mile stretch of dense forest. The depth of each print indicates that whatever made it weighed 800 pounds. 800 pounds. And there's other, more dramatic evidence. On a hot afternoon in October, Roger Patterson and a friend were riding through some woods in northern California. Suddenly their horses shied. They looked ahead and saw something squatting by the creek. As the creature ambled away, Patterson took this film that has been analyzed, debated, and contested ever since.